All right, so imagine trying to build something, like a really complex machine,
Hmm.
but with absolutely no instructions.
Yeah, sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. Well, in the business world, that's kind of where this thing called TOGAF 10 comes in. It's
Yeah.
like this giant instruction manual for a company's whole IT system.
You got it. And that's exactly what we're looking at today. Excerpts from Mastering TOGAF 10, a comprehensive guide to enterprise architecture and practical implementation. Trying to break it all down.
Okay, now full disclosure, you're way more the expert on this than I am.
Oh, we'll see about that.
So before we get lost in the technical weeds, can you give me and the listener, like, the TOGAF 10 for Dummies version? What's the main idea?
So the main idea is 2IF10, it's all about making sure that a business's technology actually works with their big goals.
Okay, makes sense. I mean, everyone wants their tech to, help them get where they want to go.
Exactly.
But I got to ask, the book mentions all these terms, like modes, agile integration, digital enterprise concepts. Are those just fancy buzzwords, or is there more to them?
No, those are actually really important to how TOGAF10 works.
Oh, okay.
So modes, for example, think of those like settings on a camera. You can adjust them, right, to fit different situations.
Okay, yeah.
It's the same idea here. You might need a really detailed approach for like a huge system overhaul, but for a smaller project, you can be a little more flexible.
So it's not like one size fits all. You can kind of customize it.
Exactly. And that's actually where Agile integration comes in. So TOGAF 10 is built to work with Agile methodologies, which are all about being super flexible and making changes as you go.
Right, agile. I've definitely heard that term, but how does that even work with TOGAF? Does it clash, or is it pretty seamless?
It works really well. Think of it like building a house, right?
Okay.
Agile is like making sure each room is good to go before moving on to the next one, always getting feedback and adjusting. TOGAF is like the overall blueprint for the whole house.
So they kind of work together.
Yeah, they complement each other.
Okay, that's starting to click. Now, and another term the book keeps using is technical reference model, or TRM.
Hmm.
Honestly, kind of sounds intimidating. Can you break that down a little?
The TRM, actually, it's pretty cool once you understand it. Imagine it's like a giant toolbox filled with all these pre-made parts for building your IT system.
Okay.
It's like Lego bricks for architects.
Lego bricks. Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Right. They can use these standard pieces to represent different parts of the system, like servers, databases, applications, all that.
So instead of starting from scratch every time, you've got these ready-made building blocks.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And this makes it so much easier for different teams to work together. They can all understand each other's designs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I imagine things can get lost in translation if everyone's speaking a different language.
Exactly.
Now, something I found interesting was the book's claim that TOGAF 10 isn't just for hardcore tech people. It says anyone involved in building or managing technology can benefit. Is that really true, or is that just marketing hype?
Oh, it's definitely true. TOGAF 10 is about more than just the technical stuff.
Okay.
It's about understanding how technology fits into the bigger picture of a business.
So even someone in marketing or finance who maybe isn't writing code, they could still get something out of this.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it like a marketing team wants to launch a new app.
Right.
Yeah, using TOGAF 10 can help them make sure that app works smoothly with the company's other systems and data, so everything's connected.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal. But let's be real for a sec. A lot of people listening are probably thinking, this all sounds great, but who has time to learn a whole new framework?
I know, right? Everyone's busy. But that's where the practicality of TOGAF 10 comes in. It's not just some abstract theory. This book is packed with real-world examples and case studies showing how companies have used TOGAF to solve actual problems, like migrating to the cloud or streamlining their IT processes.
See, that's what gets me excited. Real-world examples. It's one thing to learn about the framework, but seeing it in action, that's when it really clicks.
Yeah, definitely. And the book goes even further. It gives you templates and sample questions to help you get ready for the TOGAF 10 certification exams.
Wait, hold on, certifications. Now it sounds like we're getting into serious techie territory again.
Not really. So while certification can be a great way to, level up your career, it's not the only reason to learn TOGAF 10. Even if you never take an exam, the knowledge you get from the framework can be really valuable. It's about being a more strategic thinker when it comes to tech and business.
Okay, I'm convinced, but one last question. Is 2GF10 just another tech fad, or is this something with some staying power?
Well, what's really interesting is that TOGAF has actually been around for quite a while, and it's evolved over time. TOGAF 10 is just the latest version, reflecting all the current trends and challenges in enterprise architecture.
So it's not just a flash in the pan. It's been tested and refined over years.
Exactly. And here's something else that's interesting. We have excerpts from both the Amazon.com US and Amazon.India listings for this book.
You mean the fact that it's available in multiple regions? Sure, that shows global interest, but I imagine any popular book would be sold worldwide.
It's more than that. The content and descriptions are almost the same across both listings. So what does that tell us?
Hmm. That the core ideas of TOGAF 10 are relevant no matter where you are or what industry you're in.
Exactly. TOGAF 10 provides a kind of universal language for building and managing technology, which is super valuable in today's world.
Okay, now that is interesting. So it's not just a Western-centric approach to enterprise architecture, but something that really resonates globally. This has been super insightful so far, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. But before we go deeper, I want to hear from our listener. What's jumping out at you so far about TOGAF 10? What are you most curious about? Take a moment to think about that as we get ready to explore even more of this fascinating framework.
Yeah, take a second. We'll be right back. You know, it's funny, we always talk about how tech is changing so fast, but the problems businesses have with IT, those stay pretty much the same.
Yeah, you're right. Making sure systems are secure, that they can handle more and more demands, things like that.
Exactly. And those are the areas where TOGAF 10 really shines. It gives you a structured way to think about these challenges.
That makes sense. But I'm curious, we keep mentioning this Mastering TOGAF 10 book. How about some examples? What kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, one that comes to mind is about a big retailer. They used TOGAF 10 to completely redo their online store.
Their online store. What was going on there?
The site kept crashing, it was slow, the checkout was clunky, a whole mess.
Yikes. I bet that wasn't good for business.
No, it was a nightmare. But they were able to use TOGAF 10 to figure out what was going wrong and then design a whole new architecture for the website.
So they didn't just try to fix the old system. They started fresh.
Yeah, they used TOGAF 10 to create a roadmap for a step-by-step migration to a much better platform. The results were pretty amazing.
I bet. What happened?
Way less downtime, faster loading times, and a much smoother checkout.
Wow, that's a huge improvement.
Yeah, it really shows the power of TOGAF 10, how it's not just theory, it gets things done. And it's not just for big retailers either. The book has examples from all kinds of industries: healthcare, finance, government.
Okay, so it's pretty versatile then. But is it only useful for building something totally new? Or can it help with those old legacy systems that a lot of companies are stuck with?
Great question. And yes, TOGAF 10 can be a lifesaver for those legacy systems. It gives you a framework to assess them, figure out their weaknesses, and then come up with a plan to modernize.
So it's like having a blueprint for renovating an old house, but without accidentally knocking down a wall you need.
Perfect analogy. And just like with a house, you need a clear idea of what you want in the end. What are your business goals? How can tech help you reach those? TOGAF 10 helps you answer those questions.
Makes sense. But wouldn't all of that require a whole team of TOGAF experts? I mean, this all sounds pretty complex.
It can be complex, sure, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. TOGAF 10 is actually designed to be scalable.
Scalable, so you can adjust it to fit the size of your company.
Exactly. You just focus on the principles and concepts that make sense for your specific situation. And remember, the book has those templates and guidance to help you get started.
Right, right. Now, this reminds me of something we talked about earlier, stakeholder management. The book seems to really emphasize that human side of enterprise architecture.
Mhm.
Why is that so important?
Well, because you never implement tech in a vacuum, right? It always affects people, employees, customers, partners. TOGAF 10 recognizes that. It gives you a way to include those stakeholders all along the way.
So it's not just about the tech itself, but how people interact with it, how it affects their work?
Exactly. And that's where architecture governance comes in.
Ah, there's another one of those terms.
Right. It's about setting clear rules, who's responsible for what, how decisions are made, all to make sure the tech is aligned with what everyone needs.
So it's making sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
And that the tech is being used in a way that benefits everyone, not just the IT department.
That's it. And it's about avoiding those situations where you roll out a new system and no one knows how to use it or why it's even there in the first place.
Right. Been there. And all of this makes me think about cloud computing, microservices, all these big trends in tech. Seems like TOGAF 10 could have a big role to play in managing those changes.
You're right on the money. Cloud migration, microservices, they have a ton of benefits, but also new challenges.
I bet.
TOGAF 10 can help companies navigate all of that, make the transition smooth, and minimize any disruptions to their business.
So it's like a roadmap for these new technologies.
And having a good guide can make all the difference. That's where this book, Mastering TOGAF 10, seems so valuable. It really breaks down the framework and gives you those practical insights. We've talked a lot about TOGAF 10 as this framework for building IT systems, but could it be used for other parts of a business too?
Hmm. That's an interesting thought. I mean, the core idea is like thinking about systems as a whole, involving everyone who's affected. Those could be useful in a lot of situations.
Exactly. Those TOGAF 10 principles could be incredibly valuable anytime you're trying to get everyone on the same page and make positive changes.
So it's not just about technology, but a way of thinking, a way of solving any kind of problem.
Exactly. And that's what makes TOGAF 10 so fascinating. It's not just a set of rules, it's a whole philosophy. This has been a really great discussion. We've covered so much. But before we wrap up, I want to bring our listener back in. What are your main takeaways so far? What parts of this framework are really resonating with you? Think about that as we move to our final thoughts.
It really is amazing how TOGAF can apply to like so many situations. It's like a Swiss Army knife for business problems.
I know, right?
We talked about cloud migration, updating old systems, even marketing campaigns. But with all this focus on practicality, does TOGAF 10 ever address the bigger picture stuff? Like, ethical considerations, how tech impacts society.
Well, that's where architecture principles come in. Think of them like the guiding values that shape how you actually use TOGAF.
Okay.
Things like transparency, sustainability, inclusivity, you can build those right into the framework to make sure technology is being used responsibly.
So it's not just about systems at work, but systems that, like, do good.
Exactly. And the book really stresses this, how important it is to make sure tech aligns with an organization's values.
That's great to hear because, honestly, sometimes it feels like tech is just running wild without thinking about the consequences.
I know what you mean, but I think TOGAF 10 actually gives us a way to be more mindful, more intentional about how we design and use technology.
I like that. So, gotta ask, with all the good stuff we've talked about, are there any downsides to TOGAF 10? Any potential pitfalls?
Of course, like any framework, TOGAF 10 can get a little too bureaucratic, especially if you don't use some common sense.
Right, so it's not a magic solution. You can't just follow the steps blindly and expect everything to work out.
You got it. You need people who really understand the framework and can adapt it to their organization, and you need everyone on board from the top down.
Otherwise, it's just another book on the shelf.
Exactly. And that's why this Mastering TOGAF 10 book is so interesting. It goes beyond the technical stuff, helps you understand the whole philosophy behind the framework.
I see. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. We've covered TOGAF 10 from all angles, practical, conceptual, even philosophical. Before we wrap up, what's the one big thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
That's a tough one. But if I had to pick one thing, I'd say TOGAF 10 is a really powerful way to make sure technology helps you achieve your business goals, but also that it's used ethically and responsibly.
I love that. It's not just about being efficient, it's about purpose.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into TOGAF 10. I hope our listener feels inspired to learn more.
It's been a pleasure talking with you about this.
And to our listener, if you're intrigued by what you've heard today, keep exploring. Dive deeper into the world of TOGAF 10 and see how it can change the way you think about tech and business. Maybe you'll even become the next TOGAF expert. Until next time.